The following program contains content that may not be suitable for children. Parental discretion is advised.
Help women save lives and peacefully end abortion where you live.
I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired.
You were serious about that?
Be inspired to change hearts and minds by joining over 1 million volunteers taking part in the global movement happening in your neighborhood.
She says, pray that I can get through this abortion. And I said, oh, no. So she went ahead and went into the abortion clinic. And she just came out. She told me, I'm not going to get the abortion. We just had a baby saved. We had a baby saved in Memphis today. Praise the Lord.
This is the 40 Days for Life podcast with your host, Sean Carney.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the 40 Days for Life podcast. I am Sean Carney, the president of 40 Days for Life, and your host for this podcast, which is dedicated to helping you end abortion where you live. If you have not geared up with 40 Days for Life gear as it gets cooler in a lot of the country, be sure to go to 40daysforlife.com, click on the store, and look at our cool gear that we have, particularly for winter. You could get the camo hoodie, which is a favorite from a lot of people. We also have some new quarter zips and all that good stuff. You can also get What to Say When Part 2. Today, it's months away, but this is a little bit of a Mother's Day podcast. We will celebrate mothers and talk about how women can raise children, how they are raising children, and how the world has just forgotten that. After a hostile election year, we were told that there's nothing really to a woman except her access to abortion. That's what makes her great. And so we don't believe that to be true. So today we will be celebrating mothers, an early Mother's Day. It's time to start thinking about Mother's Day, actually, even though it's months away. Somebody who definitely needs to be thinking about Mother's Day because he is horrible at planning for Mother's Day and even worse at buying his wonderful wife Mother's Day gifts, and that is, of course, the disgrace of Mother's Day himself, Mr. Steve Carlin.
Hey, man, I nailed Mother's Day last year. Now, granted, I didn't come up with a gift idea until the day before Mother's Day, but it was clutch.
Here's why I disregard that entirely, because that's like you're like 1 for 40 in Mother's Days, and so you're just like, hey, we kicked a field goal at the end of the game. We didn't get shut out. Yeah, but you lost 66-3.
I think I'm probably like batting between 500 and 600. It works out well more than it doesn't. You just notice the years where it doesn't work out.
Well, the baseball analogy, I think you're batting like 167.
Ooh, ouch.
I don't know.
Maybe we should have Laura on the podcast and see if your batting average is. Okay. Somebody who's batting 1,000 all the time is Ramona Trevino. We can't stop laughing. I can't stop laughing because I'm
still here.
It's so ridiculous. These idiots with Trump getting elected, it's like something new every week. Ramona is still celebrating not being deported.
Uh-huh.
I can't even believe you haven't been. Aren't you a 4th generation Texan?
I am, Sean, but I do have my bags packed and waiting at the front door just in case.
We are gonna deport Ramona. I think she voted for you. Never mind. I love Ramona. She's beautiful. She's one of the best. So this continues to be a thing. I don't know. When you said I'm glad I haven't been deported, I couldn't stop laughing. The whole thing is absurd with all this stuff.
If you're brown, you need to be afraid. That was the message.
But the brown people voted for Trump.
Exactly.
But are we just not acknowledging that?
No, we can't. We have to continue the narrative, right?
We established it right after the election that Ramona is both racist and misogynist,
yes,
right?
So. That's correct.
Well, yes, that was MSNBC, and they only report on facts. So you didn't know.
And since 2016, I've been carrying my passport on me, on my person,
just in
case, any moment I can
get stopped at the grocery store.
Exactly.
You're out. So it's funny with you, but on a very serious note, I want Steve to get deported. I just think that it would be entertaining to see you. I don't know. However they do it, they take you. You
load it up into
house.
A van or something?
The problem is, this is my issue with you being deported, as fun as that would be, be great podcast material. Where would they dump you? You're kind of like aren't you a mix?
That was going to be my question.
Poland?
Hey, you know what? I am more indigenous American than Elizabeth Warren is.
Really?
And in fact, descended from a chief. So I deserve to be here more than anybody in this room or any of the people watching or listening to the podcast at home.
Dang. Okay, I didn't
I have to argue with that, though, Steve. I'm like 59% indigenous.
She's got, yeah.
All right, well, you can...
Okay,
You
I
can
can stay.
stay.
I can stay. I can
They're going to...
What about Irish mix? Or are they just going to come get me and dump me back in, Kildare, where we're from in Ireland?
Well,
It's
I mean, you do
possible.
tan well, Sean, so be careful.
I could try to deny my Irish heritage so I could stay.
I think the reason Ramona hasn't been deported yet is because first they're going to force her to give birth, and then they'll deport
That's
her.
true. That's true. That's a valid reason, Steve. I agree with that.
I don't know. It was really, really funny. I can't believe I haven't been deported yet. We were all supposed to be deported, and somehow Ramona has.
I'm still here.
You're under the radar.
I'm still here.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Today's topic, by the way, besides deporting Steve, is can mothers really do it all? And are mothers meant to do it all? And is motherhood? We're going to have some great examples. I think some surprising examples. But there is this temptation, I think. You got pregnant. It's over. And we pro-lifers need to remind people, not because we believe it or it fits our little cause, but because it's actually true that your dreams and your aspirations are not crushed and your ambitions are not crushed. Why are you laughing?
Dreams, aspirations, ambitions. Doesn't sound familiar to you?
No. What am I missing?
I'm missing it too.
Harris. That's all she ever said.
Oh, sorry. I've blocked the election out of my brain.
Dreams, aspirations.
Once you didn't get deported, I'd just quit thinking about politics.
You have been unburdened from what has been.
I have been unburdened from what has been. Wow. So yes, ambitions. That people have children, whether it's great circumstances or not so great circumstances, and they can thrive. And I think we've just ignored that as a culture because it's like something to be ashamed of. You're supposed to just celebrate abortion all the time.
Well, and I think it goes both ways. So we have this talking point that, you can do it, which is all great. I'm all for empowering young women who find themselves in unexpected, unplanned pregnancies to be able to follow through with their dreams. But I think there's also a risk of using that talking point all the time, because I think what happens is that when young women become pregnant, whether it's planned, unplanned, whatever the circumstances, there is this instinctually things change. And so let's say maybe you don't identify pro-life or pro-choice and you find out you're pregnant. Let's say it's just kind of you're indifferent to it. You find out you're pregnant, it's unexpected. There can be that crisis moment, but then there's also like, okay, I'm going to have this baby. But then there's this societal pressure in a sense of, now what? You're not going to give up on school, you're not going to give up on this, are you? And I think that kind of puts this pressure on women to think that if they don't continue with those plans, that somehow they're a failure. And in choosing motherhood over those things makes them a failure. And I think that's what we want to discuss, is that it's not. Your priorities change when you become a mother. And sometimes it's just for a season that you kind of put things on hold. And that's okay. Like, I want women to know that's okay too.
I think it's also more okay now than it was 20 years ago. I think that it's in the way the world's changed, and that you can get a degree online, you can work from home, you can do a lot of different things, and we have a lot of people who work at 40 Days for Life who are married and the moms stay at home, and we have a lot of working moms, and it does work. And I think that there's two decisions that you see that is more okay, and we'll go through some of the celebrities and stuff, but there's the first decision that you want children. Okay. Then there's the decision of you want to stay home with those children, and you could easily do something else. My wife is a great example of that. I mean, it's not like profound knowledge. Mary Lisa is way smarter than me and way more gifted than me. And that's not like me being, oh, he's a nice husband. That's actual like documented because we went to the same high school and college that she is in fact smarter than I am. And so we won't get in the SATs. But like her dad's a doctor. She could have easily been a doctor. She could have been a doctor and had children and all of that. But I don't think women get enough credit for making those decisions, number one, that are okay just because you could do something. If you want to do something else, if you want to stay home, if you don't want to stay home, it's great. But that when you choose children, you're obviously choosing tremendous sacrifice and selflessness, but you're rejecting other things. It's a true sacrifice to give up things. And that just gets glossed over. And when you decide to stay home with your children, but it's amazing how many women do take the 5, 8, 10-year gap or whatever you want to call it and just stay home with their kids.
And that's not always possible either.
Right.
And I think, like for me having been a teenager when I got pregnant the first time at 16, obviously that wasn't a plan of mine. I had plans of my own, right? But everything shifted and it changed. And everyone's, the voices out there where Ramona's ruined her life.
Really?
Yeah.
What?
Not within my family, but
sure.
The small town that I live in and where I'm from, Ramona's ruined her life because I was a straight A student and, they thought, oh, she's going to go on and do great things, which I have.
Right.
Apart from this, motherhood is the greatest thing, right? And so for people to say, oh, Ramona's ruined her life and then come back later and see, my adult daughter and putting it together like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that was your daughter. And feeling I actually had someone tell me that later, like my daughter was in high school. And she said, I never put 2 and 2 together that was your daughter. And she said, I remember thinking when you got pregnant.
Wow.
You've ruined your life, but now they see.
That's awesome.
And
you don't think about that. Mm-mm. And you're very close to your daughter. So you're 16 years older?
17.
17. Yeah, 17 years old.
I had her when I was 17.
How fun is that?
Yeah.
But so if you turn the clock back to that, right? Because a lot of people would say, yeah, but in your own mind, I mean, you were a kid, basically. Weren't you freaking out? What was the positive driving force that made you overcome that and just not care what people said? I'm sure you had struggles.
I think it was interesting because culturally, it just wasn't something we talked. Abortion wasn't a topic we discussed. And I think that had its benefit because when I became pregnant, it was just something that was unthinkable. Literally, it never crossed my mind. My parents never considered it for me. And I think that was a huge blessing because I think we were just naturally pro-life. Like if you got pregnant, okay, you're going to have this baby, right? It wasn't.
It's never an option.
It was never an option. And it wasn't ever something we talked about. And so I feel extremely blessed for that we never talked about it. We never discussed it. And however, the father of my daughter wanted me to have an abortion, and thankfully I never considered it. But I just remember, when my pregnancy test was positive, I was like, whoa. You know what I mean? It's just like, oh my gosh. But I think maybe I was the exception in that if you have sex, you kind of know the natural consequences of that.
Right.
And I entertained that thought of, if that happens, am I going to be okay with that? Because it could happen. And so now you're faced with the choice, either stop doing these things or continue to do it and
run the risk.
So
that you had thought about.
So I had already accepted the responsibility of that consequence, if that happened. I accepted that. I don't know about, but I think that's what we're missing in our society is that no one wants to really think about those things.
There is how did this happen?
Yeah.
And
we all know how it happens.
Right. Yep.
Something I think is kind of interesting about this narrative that you ruin your life narrative is I'm sure there are people where they make a decision, they get pregnant at a time where it's not ideal, or maybe they're not married or whatever, and problems can build upon each other, things can go wrong. But don't you think that for the vast majority of both women and men, having a child actually takes you in the other direction. It requires you to become responsible. It requires you to figure things out. I think about this article that we talked about in the Washington Post much of last year, where the couple, the Texas abortion ban made them parents, and look at how terrible things are going. And when you like read between the lines in the article, like the guy went from working at a burrito store to serving his country in the armed forces. The mom is like working with a career coach to figure out like what she's gonna do. And this couple that was going nowhere, suddenly like Parenthood led them to get married, and they're talking about growing their family. And I think that's a common story. We don't talk about it in the pro-abortion narrative, but Parenthood drives you to better yourself for the love of your child.
That was the oddest article ever written in the Washington Post. And we've talked about it a lot because the headline is like, "Evil Texas ruins lives of parents." And basically,
and they inadvertently
halfway
supported
throughout the end, they're just like, "We can't imagine life without our beautiful girls." Like a normal response. And you're like, What
was the point of this?
What do y'all want us to believe? And it definitely wasn't a written like, you make up your own mind to see if they should have kids or not. And you're like, but they have kids and they're happy about it. Like, what's wrong with you? And it's hard. It's very hard. And everybody knows that. And it's one of the
but it's hard in a good way.
It's hard in a good way, and to me, it's one of the it's in a category of its own where parenting is the hardest thing that you will ever do that is always worth it. And there's really nothing like that, right? You can take building your career, you can take exercise, you can take all these other topics. And you're just like, there's part of it where this just isn't worth it. And parenting is always worth it.
I actually go as far as to saying it saved my life. Because I think if I look back in hindsight and the kind of person that I was, very selfish and just a lot different than I am today, and even in terms of my faith, I think it saved my life because I think the trajectory of my life would have went completely differently. I had plans to, leave, go to school out of state, never look back, say, deuces to my family and bye.
Get out. Were you like,
I'm out of here.
I'm out
of here. Yeah. Okay. And I hated being in a small town, very kind of progressive mentality. And I think it saved me. And God, and again, it just goes to show how God knows better. God knows us and he knows what's good for us. And I really do believe that saved my life, that having my daughter saved my life.
It's beautiful.
I can think of a lot of things that could have went really badly. I mean, obviously I did work for Planned Parenthood, so that was bad.
Right.
But God brought me back again.
But the fact that you're saying it could have been worse
It could have been worse than that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I do believe that.
That's beautiful. Okay, so that myth, we've covered that. Yes, you can have a career, go to college, still be a mom. I think it's done more. I think it's still promoted more now than it used to just be motherhood or career,
right,
for the feminists.
And you can do it, but I also want the message to moms being, don't feel like you're a failure if you're not doing it. I think that is what's really important because there's all this pressure that a lot of times women are like, if I don't do that, everyone's going to think I'm a failure, right? And so I want them to know that I want to empower you to be a mother. If you want to stay at home and, really put yourself into that, like just empty your whole self into motherhood and homemaking because now what you thought was your dream is no longer your dream. I don't think women should feel badly about that. And I think there is a pressure, especially on social media, that moms will sit around at home and compare themselves to other women.
Yeah.
And that drives me mad. And I don't want women to feel that way. I want them to embrace their motherhood, embrace the fact that their house is a mess because they've been breastfeeding all day or whatnot, whatever it is that they're doing, right? Embrace the fact that they're sitting around in their yoga pants with vomit on their T-shirt. I want women to feel like that's okay and not feel this pressure to compare themselves to others who seemingly have it all together because I don't believe that that's the case.
And that can happen with moms. That can happen with women who have children.
Yep.
And the social media and like, today we baked this kind of cake and did these crafts. And you're sitting here going, I'm just trying to survive.
Yeah. I'm just trying to.
I think it is
trying to keep the kid from eating the dog food or whatever. Yeah.
I think it is sort of a culture of vanity that we have because if you look at it like, well, what are you going to achieve? what greater achievement is there than bringing an immortal soul into the world? Like, it's the most beautiful thing. Sean and I have talked about how we've never been more impressed with our wives than when they bring new life into the world. And I've been kind of thinking, why do we have this sort of cultural denigration of motherhood? And my thought is that it's because, like, you've got all, like, the parents who are like, well, my daughter went to Harvard, or my son is out in Seattle working for Google. And, like, there's sort of like the one up, like, you have to be the greatest or you're not worth anything. And when, like, anybody can have a child, like, it's common to our humanity. Like, everybody has a mother. Anybody can have a child. I guess there's folks who suffer from infertility, and I don't want to write that off, but I think it's seen as common, and so people, it's not like a way to set yourself above the pack, as though that's what really matters in our lives.
The word that we have lost, because number one, we just don't have very good manners these days, but number two, we're just bad socially with some stuff, but we don't say congratulations enough. Just, that's it.
Yep.
We had a baby. Congratulations. We're pregnant. Congratulations. We're pregnant with our first, and we're 21 years old. Congratulations. We're pregnant with our 8th, and we're 40. Congratulations. Even if you don't mean it, shut up and say congratulations. There's a lot of stuff. And I've noticed just in my own life, when something happens, whatever, something will come up. Oh, I tell you a recent one, which was interesting. Bridget, my oldest, going to college. And just, I was telling one of the, he's from Colombia. And because exactly.
Is he still here?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
He didn't get deported.
Hasn't been deported
no,
yet?
he's in, I think they have 7 or 8 kids also. But our kids go to school together. And his kids are younger. So I said, oh, yeah, my oldest went to college. And, of course, with the coolest accent in the world, he goes, congratulations. And nobody had said that to me because my kid's going to college. You don't think about it. But it was just like, it was such a nice thing to say. And I'm like, we let things go by that are big deals that we just don't. And then really we're doing the opposite. And you and I have encountered this. I'm sure you have encountered it, where whatever, you're having another baby and you're just like, do we have to tell fill in the blank those relatives?
Oh, yeah.
Or they don't like the name of the kid, right? And it's just like,
I can sign up for that one.
Gosh. And it's just like, shut up and say congratulations. Yeah. And people do stuff, that I'm like, I don't get it, but I know it's an accomplishment for them. Like they, whatever, did something. I'm like, congratulations. That's awesome. Because it was some goal of theirs or whatever. But
in regard to the congratulations,
Steve's boiling over. I know who you're thinking of.
To the congratulations when you're pregnant, do you think, and I wouldn't know because I was born after Roe and you both were born after Roe, but do you think that there was a huge shift after legalization of abortion in where people stopped congratulating women on pregnancy?
No, I don't. And I'm being very optimistic, maybe a little head in the sand. I think what that did is revealed how psychopathic the other side is. Because I'm saying the shift was attempted and it didn't work in normal average life. I would say similar actually to the 2020 BLM riots, right? Where you have white dudes walking around going, do all the black people hate me? And then you go and you encounter black people all the time and they treat you just the same as they always did. And you're like, maybe this is like a media thing. And I would say it's like that. Like it was all forced from the media that run and have an abortion, but your average woman was walking around going, I don't know if I would have an abortion. Maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. But why are we talking about like I get a airline voucher to fly to California to have an abortion? I think that was really. I also think
aversion to pregnant women having like their 6th baby. You think that?
I don't think Roe. I think
you don't think there's been an
I think people respond positively to that or rudely. I don't think Roe falling had anything to do with it.
No, I'm talking about Roe, the legalization of abortion. Do you think that
legalization
had an impact? Like, so let's say in 1965.
Okay, I'm sorry.
1965,
Yes.
mom is on her 6th pregnancy.
Yeah.
And people were congratulating her. versus
Yes,
now
100%.
it's like you need a TV, which is
Totally.
what I always got. It's
Totally
like,
agree. You
really?
need the
Another
TV
one?
You need the TV in the bedroom.
Yeah, you don't have enough to do, right?
Yeah.
You're bored. You need another baby?
And you're not allowed to make inappropriate comments. I do. Like, you can talk about my sex life. I can't. Like, it's so rude.
Right.
Like, I don't even know you.
Right.
You know, like, you need a TV in the bedroom. Hit the remote. You know, you can't do all that. The creepy guy voice. But, like, you know, all that stuff. Or, yeah, we're on contraception. It doesn't work. Stay away from that, man. Bad news.
After we had number 5, we had a family reunion, and my aunt like pulled Laura aside and had an intervention. She's like, "Are you all right? Like, are you all right?" Like, and Laura's like, "No, he's just like I'm
signal
not
to
allowed-
me."
I'm not allowed to leave home." There's like a Vietnam video or something like
Oh my
that.
gosh.
Help Laura escape.
And this was serious.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Which part of that is culturally, so we'll defend the aunt, right? Part of that is, was she a baby boomer?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she may be early Gen X. I'm not sure.
Okay. But she grew up with that culturally that, you know, you had, this is actually where one of the many reasons Latinos are give me such great hope is because all of our Latino friends and strangers, if we go into a place, we have a place, I won't name it, but everybody eats there. We're the only white people, so you know it's good. They love that we have all these kids.
Yeah.
It's like celebrated. It's wonderful. They don't care if you have 5 or 10. I don't think you could scandalize a lot of Latinos. I know they're falling for it. They're falling for this garbage from the West more now than ever. But overall,
Well, after November, I'm not so sure that they're falling for it more now. Than
well,
ever.
that's true. But the contraceptive mentality they're like buying into. But still, it's ingrained in the culture. Like, oh, you have 13 kids, great. So does my cousin. So do I. I'm one of 10. It's just not. There's no scandalized. But I do think the post Roe, or sorry, the post like we get Roe v. Wade, 1973, is like you're not supposed to have a lot of kids anymore.
Right.
You really don't have to. We have pills and we have abortion, and you don't really have to do.
And that kind of ushered into this mentality of this feminist mentality of we are not liberated unless we can go to college, have a career, and all of these other things. And so it shifts the mentality, you know, and women start feeling like, oh, if I'm not a career woman and I'm not going and getting my education and I'm just stuck at home having babies, and whether it's 1 kid or 2 kids or you know 12
matter.
kids, it doesn't matter.
It's the
suddenly
response
you're
to
just
it.
a failure.
It doesn't mean every woman has to go and have 9 kids. But
Right.
It's the response and the attitude towards it. And, you know, I think a problem, it's not for, if we say I have 8 kids, it's actually easier now than it was with like 4 or 5 because you're just an alien. You're just like, people write you off and like, God, she should be probably in some institution or something. It's the wife I feel bad for. And so all of that makes it easy. But you like the Southern gossip lady?
do.
Bless her heart.
It's the wife I
Yeah,
feel for.
I got it. I can't.
Bless
I'll
her
say something
heart.
inappropriate. Yeah, boy. So, anyways, because they gossip about how many kids you have for sure. But you know, if you have 8 kids, I think the hardest is you're pregnant with number 2, and everybody's like, "So you done?" You get your boy or girl or just 2 kids, but the having more than 2. When I don't know what you would say. I know it's depending on the kids. For us, 4 was the hardest because you have the max of kids who can't really do a whole lot for themselves, and you're obviously outnumbered. And it's just 4 was the hardest, and it got easier. After that because the other ones get older. And the Lord blessed me with 2 girls as the oldest, which I was terrified of when they were born. But then they get older and you're like, oh my gosh, a 11-year-old, you know, girl is like as mature or more mature than like a 26-year-old dude. But yeah, there's this expectation not only that, okay, are you okay, like Laura, but also like, well, this is it, right? You had 2 kids or you have 3 kids.
Oh, he's so cute. He's so cute. How adorable. I'm done. Are you done?
I'm done. Are you done?
Yeah.
And it's just an
I've gotten, are you fixed?
like
Were you broken?
Like
you're
I'm a dog.
They treat you like
Have
a
you
dog.
been spayed, Ramona? Or your husband been neutered yet?
Look, well,
It brings out the best in folks, doesn't it? When you have every time you're pregnant.
But there's also
I'm uncomfortable with the word vasectomy, just in general. Even if I didn't know what it was, I'd be like, that doesn't sound good. But I know that that's like this thing, and you see the vasectomy reversal billboards, and I love it when like my sons ask me what that is, and they're of appropriate age. I'm like, well, they got their business cut, and you just kind of leave it at that. But I don't. That is the mentality that you're going to go get neutered.
Mm-hmm.
Remember the movie Office Space?
Of course.
They asked the guy, like, has anyone at your job ever asked you if you have a case of the Mondays? And the guy's like, no, hell no. No, I think they'd kick your butt for saying that. That's kind of how I want to respond to the vasectomy. Like, are you fixed?
Are you fixed? So, yeah, that's another one that's really tough to explain, I think, to our ancestors in previous, cultures and civilizations, is that obviously abortion, they just wouldn't believe it.
But while we're on like the topic of the big families, I think there's also a tipping point. Like, okay, we had 2 boys and then we had the girl, and it's like, well, you collected the whole set. Now you're done, right? And then we had another one, and there was like, maybe at like 4 was like, okay, these people clearly don't get it. I'm going to quit asking them if they're done because they obviously are just going to keep having kids as long as they can.
I do have I know that that's like a cultural thing, and I don't want to be a jerk. So I say the same line like whenever it's like 5, 6, 7, 8, like the last however 8 years, I guess. So they say, okay, are you done? And I'm like, I don't think I can answer that, because if you have 7 kids and somebody says you're really done, who would actually believe that? And they laugh. They're like, oh, that's a good point. I have 8 kids. If I say I'm done, like, who would actually even believe me? So I try to like make light of it. I don't have that discipline with other comments,
I'm not easily offended at all.
I
I just think it's comical, and it reveals more about them than it does about me, when they're like, are you done?
Too. I go sentimental and sort of like jerk people in line of just like, it's a lot. 8 kids is a lot of kids. And I don't know what I would do without my kids. Like, I absolutely love them. They're good kids. We have a blast. It's a lot of work. They drive us crazy sometimes, but it's real. Like, we live in a very like fun house. I just say that a million times, and people are like, oh, that's good. It's a little like, good for you. You're crazy. But why can't we say the positive? Which is, everybody in their hearts knows is true. And that doesn't matter if you have 1 kid or 2 kids or 6 kids. But it's just, why can't we talk about how this is, since the history of civilization, the most rewarding thing that we do, which is have children.
Absolutely.
And it's why also on the religious front, it is a great it's only Catholic priests now, but for a vow of celibacy, to give that up for the sake of the kingdom, as Christ says in Matthew 19, that you forsake marriage for the sake of the kingdom, and that's a real sacrifice. It's not the priests are like these weirdos that have no desire to have a family. No, it's that they give that up for the glory of God, and that in and of itself is a real sacrifice.
I'm on a committee that like helps screen the incoming seminarians, and
Of course he is.
is that a weird thing to say?
Oh man, it's just, I want to know. Everybody has like, well, tell me about your family life, and Steve is like, what were Brett Favre's stats in the 1993 NFC Championship game? Sorry,
No, it's all
We're about
good.
to make
Not
a
sure how to segue back.
Substantive.
Like, one of the things that we do is to make sure, like, you could get someone who is going into the seminary for the wrong reasons. Maybe they're aware of it, maybe they don't. But we don't want men going to Catholic seminary who don't have that natural desire for marriage and a family, because it's a human thing. It's a profoundly human thing and a profoundly natural thing, and it has to truly be a sacrifice. Otherwise, it's not for the kingdom.
Yeah, it's totally not for the kingdom. As one priest, I was at a discernment thing, and this guy was like, I don't know, Father. I don't know if I can be a priest. I really like women. And the priest said, well, we want the boys that like the girls. Yeah. Like it's kind of the opposite that gets you in trouble.
Our previous bishop one time, he was like talking to a guy trying to persuade him to consider the seminary. He's like, I like girls too much, similar thing. He's like, well, if you're going to get married, you have to give up all girls except for one. I'm just asking you to give up one more.
Yeah, it is. It's a funny thing. Well, I discerned the priesthood and in high school. And I remember one of the relatives, I will say, was like, it was a little jerk. It was like the guy that pulled Laura aside. You're never going to have sex. And I was like 17 or 18 at the time. And I go, no, I realize that is actually part of that's, I think, pretty common sense. But I said, but I don't do that now. Like, that doesn't change my life. They're like, but you'll never have sex. And I'm like, but I've never had sex now. And I'm alive. I've been able to operate. I feel like I'm a sane person. They're like, I don't think you get it. You're never going to have sex. And I'm like, but that doesn't change my life from right now. Basically continuing how I've lived now. And so it always kind of like cracks me up. Okay. So we're talking about the language and how that has, gotten a lot of attention. Before we move on to the next point, I want to cite, I think one of the positive things was the reaction to the Kansas City Kickers commencement address. Because you just hear the clip that they play, like he's my wife's biggest title that she's proud of is homemaker. And he's evil, but the majority of people, liberals included, like Bill Maher, they all defended him. And then you had a lot of women saying, yeah, that's me too. Like, women that like worked and were, famous said, I have no issue with it whatsoever. And he was supposed to get deported.
Yep.
So I thought that was very positive. Okay. All right. Have we taken into consideration the real challenges abortion-minded women face? Have we?
I think so, too.
Or are we just oblivious?
I think some of us are oblivious, to be fair. I think unless you've kind of lived it and have experienced it. In my case, I've been on both sides of this, and especially as a teen pregnancy, as a teen mother. So I've given a lot of thought because I've been on the side of being a teen mom in an abusive, toxic, horrific relationship, a survivor of domestic violence, getting out of that, being married, being a single mom for a little while, getting married, having more kids, like I've kind of been through it all. And so I feel like there's probably even much worse scenarios out there. I don't think that mine's the worst. I think there's other very tragic scenarios for women. And I think that's sometimes what we, as pro-lifers sometimes come across to people as we don't care. We're not thinking about the woman. But we are thinking about the woman. And we know that abortion is not the solution. And as I said before, for me, it was a life-saving thing. And I think to, your point too, Steve, when you were talking about the couple in Texas, I mean, that's what's funny about this is like they were trying to paint this picture and push this narrative when in all reality, that's what was good. That's what motivated those parents to do something. And that's what children do for us. They're our hope. That's what gives us hope in the future, our children. And if we don't have that, it's no wonder we're all running around this country in despair, because we have nothing to hope for if we're not living for our kids and trying to make the world a better place for our children.
Yeah. There's a few friends that I've had, who know me, and they'll be complaining about life or something, and I'll be like, "You need to have a kid." Like, how you just immediately don't think about yourself? Trump had a good quote during the campaign. I remember because it reminded me. Like when he was running in 2016, he said, if we don't have a border, we don't have a country. And it was like, that kind of makes sense. And then he said, the best social program is a job. That's the best social. And you're just like, I don't know if anybody can really object to that. But one of the things he said is, if you want to end depression, or if you have depression, go work your off. Like get busy, go to work, you know, and just that focus. I know for us men, that just like, you know, it helps steer us in the right direction. Otherwise we'll be like, hey.
And this sense of purpose, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And kids do that. I would be a miserable human being to be around if I didn't have 8 kids.
I actually had a teenager point that out to me years ago. I was giving a talk at a school somewhere. I don't remember where it was at. And the high school, you know, they had questions, and then one kid came up to me after, and he didn't really have a question but a comment. He goes, "You know what I realized in listening to your story? Your daughter motivated you. Like you had a reason, you know, she was your purpose."
Yeah.
And even though you ended up at Planned Parenthood, it wasn't that you were doing it because you wanted to go out and kill babies, but you were just trying to be a good mom. You were just trying to provide for your daughter. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I really never thought about it like that. And, you know, and of course it was misguided, you know, but I was trying to give my daughter someone to look up to, even though it wasn't, you know, necessarily the right path. But I think that's what children do for us. And I think as pro-lifers, I think we do. I think some of us, yes, live in this fantasy land. We don't really think about what these abortion-minded women are going through and the crisis that they're facing, right? Sometimes I think we fail on that front. But I think for the most part, I think the majority of us do understand it. And that's why we're so passionate and so dedicated to be on the sidewalk, because we know that these are just temporary crises in a lot of these instances.
The congratulations isn't used enough, and then you're doing it. Like you're doing it. And we don't tell moms that enough. We don't tell parents that enough, but just you're doing it.
Or that you're enough.
You're enough. And you see that with strangers a lot. And if you have a waitress who's pregnant, you know, they'll sometimes make a comment about, "Oh, I'm just so big. I'm due in 2 months." And you look great. You're doing it. Look at you. You're working. You're doing it. And whatever the scenario is, but you're doing it. I think it's very important. Mary Lisa says that to me a lot. Like, you are providing. It's working. We feel overwhelmed at times.
We
like,
all need to be affirmed.
Yes,
for sure.
Yes.
My wife always points out too that whatever difficulties come with parenthood, they don't last forever. Like the up all night, like you've got a 6-month-old and you've like forgotten about that already. Like, oh yeah, remember back in like the first few weeks we're like up in the middle of the night all the time. Like you just forget. It doesn't last all that long. And I think some of this is a matter of expectations, sort of related to the like you bettering yourself for your love for your child. I'm always fascinated by this statistic that there's very little, like among married people with children, there's very little poverty. It's counterintuitive, isn't it? You're adding mouths to feed. You need more space to live in. All of these things, like your expenses go up disproportionate to your income, and yet you just don't see families in poverty all that often, statistically speaking. I know, like, my wife, like, if she's like, maybe I can't get away, but she goes to like visit out-of-town family and takes the kids, like, I turn feral very quickly. It's not good. I'm like eating popcorn for like 2 meals a day. It's not good. But our love for our children stretches us in all the best ways. We're meant to face resistance at times, and children provide a lot of resistance, and it's like strength training, I guess. We are better off for it. Part of the natural law, I think.
Well, sociologically speaking, that's irrefutable. Doesn't matter if you love abortion or hate abortion. Married parents with children they're happier and they're more stable. And they can be broke, but there is stability there, and that goes into the 70.
You're like broke together.
You're broke together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Guttmacher, who is obviously a pro-abortion research arm, but pretty accurate with most stuff. We reference them a lot. So they said 74% of women cited interference with their education, work, or ability to care for dependents as the reason they got an abortion.
Yeah, so this kind of goes down the list of the reasons that, you know, women are choosing abortion. And to all of these, we have answers, right?
It's financial.
That's the thing. It's temporary.
I don't know if I've ever been ready to have a child.
Same.
We've had 8 of them. If you're ready, you are either a narcissist, you're psychotic, or you're delusional if you're ready to have a kid. I had a buddy. He's still a friend. Very successful. But huge job. Like, you know, he came out of college making like $300,000 a year. He's a financial guy. Like your brother. But he's like, I will not get married until I won't get engaged until I have $250,000 cash in the bank. So I'm like, he's like, I know you're going to say something because you're like a pain in the, and I said, so you get $249,000 in the bank, but what happens? What happens to like your commitment or your love to get you to the 250? He's like, see, that's exactly stupid. And he's like, I want stability. I said, so if you have $100,000 in a money market account and you're 25 years old, that you're unstable? I was like, you just go down the street, like there's waiters, waitresses, firefighter, like these people have kids like the world doesn't end. And I've had relatives, younger, like cousins and stuff say that, like and I just want to be stable. What if I get transferred, and they make good money, but it's like, I want to have $500,000 net worth and all this garbage. And it's like, what if I get married and I get I get moved to Denver? I'm like, it's crazy. I said it, but it's just the blessing of the time that we live in. So now on the airplanes, it's cool. There's like multiple seats. So when you move to Denver, like your wife will sit next to you and she'll go with you to Denver. And then in Denver and actually a lot of cities, they have neighborhoods with like houses that you can buy and they allow your spouse to live in the house with you when you get transferred. It just being a total pain in the rear. But it's like, we have these myths. And I said, you're telling me this. Like, I'm not the person to tell this to. Like, just look at me. I was like, I remember walking down the aisle, or before I walked down the aisle, I was more focused when I was actually walking down the aisle. But the day before I got married, I checked my account and I didn't think anything of it. I had $66 because I had just paid a bunch of bills, right, before you get married. And I just didn't think about it, which is insane. I mean, I married Mary Lisa. I had 66. That was actually, it wasn't my net worth because I think I still had a little student debt. So whatever. It was not looking up for Mary Lisa, but I wasn't going to blow this, right? I was like, ooh, let's get this done. So, I have 8 kids, and the guy's telling me, like, well, you can't do that, and you can't. And I'm like, but I've moved across the country with multiple kids, and it's these myths of you can't do it, and a lot of it is financial. It's 73%. You can't afford a baby.
And I think people think when they're particularly young moms and young dads, they think that you just can't imagine that you have growth in your finances. Like you're making like whatever low paid job you are when you're 23. You can't imagine that you're going to have a career arc and that it will, like, your ability to provide will increase commensurate with your child's needs.
And it's a motivator. Again, if you're in a low paying job and you've got a baby on the way, you're motivated to do more, right? And you're not just going to stay there. Be like, oh, I'm just going to keep this job and we're just going to be poor. You are motivated to do something, even if it's your wife needs to take a part-time job or whatever just to help out, even if that's the case, or full-time job or whatever, right? You do it together. And I think that's the beauty of marriage, which is why we need to be promoting marriage and not promoting, promiscuity and all these things that usually lead to these women being single moms and being in poverty. We don't want that for women. We want better. We know that they deserve better, and they deserve to have someone in their lives who is committed to them.
I want to go back to something that you mentioned, and I don't have the stats, but I will say it's a lot. The majority of pregnancy resource centers, to me, seem to be run by women who are either post-abortive or were single moms. And that just, like, the whole, we've been in your shoes and we made a decision and we regretted it if we had an abortion, or we chose life, or we gave our baby up for adoption. There's just this accusation that we're disconnected from the opposite side, which is a disgrace to you because you were running a Planned Parenthood. And it's like, but we're the ones that have lived this either very roughly or people who don't have an experience with abortion, but they're like us, like in the pro-life movement, and you see it, and you work with these women. But the post-abortive women who lead the March for Life, the former workers, the former doctors like Haywood, like we always say it, but the conversion gate only swings in one direction. In these pregnancy centers, I mean, the number one feedback you always get from the clients are they didn't shame me. They had a lot of compassion. I thought they would judge me, and I think all that's gone. I don't think we judge anybody for anything these days, but it's just that's not an issue. And, you know, no wonder they're like, I went to Planned Parenthood and it was kind of sterile and everything, but this pregnancy center, I was told they would judge me and just try to save me and baptize me in the river, but they didn't. They really connected with me.
I think there's more judgment in Planned Parenthood. Like it's ugly. Whoa. The things that are said about the women, you know, and the patients. Well, I call them clients because they're all just dollar signs, but I never heard so much hatred towards women as I did when I worked for Planned Parenthood.
Book it, Steve. Yeah. All right. Yeah. And you defend.
I just say it comes from self-loathing. Like it all comes from self-loathing.
Okay.
The women that work for Planned Parenthood are not happy. And I realized it's a lot of self-loathing because I was the same person, right? There was a lot of things that I needed to heal from. And so you project that, you know, so hurt people, but yeah, just ugly comments that you hear.
Do you think that's where some of this pressure on moms to do it all is coming from?
I do.
The other thing I don't really have stats on, but I'm interested, are people getting married younger? I know we always like look at those stats every so often where people are like, well, you know, Generation Z is waiting longer to get married. I think that the Roe coming in 73 and the contraceptive mentality and all that was just like, okay, we can wait to get married and all of that. And that was very, very common. But has it trickled back, you know, with our generation? We're millennials, certainly with Generation Z. It may not have. I don't know.
No, not yet.
I'm interested. So it's still the same because
I would almost say it's worse.
I think so.
There's so much commitment
'Cause that's where
issues that people have these days.
We talked about the population crisis, and a lot of it isn't necessarily people who aren't having kids. They're people who are pushing kids back. And this is interesting. I talked with a financial guy recently, and he made a point that there's should be good news economically coming because he said the millennials, like you and I forget this because we're millennials, we're older millennials, and we had kids right away.
Right.
So we don't recognize this. But he said the millennial generation is just starting to have kids, and that will be like a tremendous economic stimulus. So he said, yeah, there's definitely a delay, and Gen Z is not quick to get married either because people are afraid of commitment.
Yep.
Let me ask you as a dude, because this is what surprised me about having a bunch of kids and just getting older. I know we're like 42, but having a big family makes me look forward to getting older.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
And when you're like 25, you're like, no, man, I don't want to be 60. There's a bunch of old people, you know, or you know, turning 70 or whatever. And I'm like, that's going to be so, because you look at the future. And if I was just single or I was just Mary Lisa and I'm sure I would look forward to certain, but you're kind of like, I don't know. But our kids, it's fun and we're constantly doing it. It's like, when so-and-so turns 30, how old will, you know, and you do all the math and Dad, you'll be 70 or whatever. You know, it's always a funny thing. But that's something I don't think people realize is you're not like living in fear of the future. It's exciting.
Yeah, and I have a soon-to-be 30-year-old and a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
I'm 47. So I'm like, okay, I've, you know, like in my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm inching closer to 50. But then I'm like, at the 6-year-old, I'm like, oh, I'm still good. I'm still young. I've got lots of years ahead of me.
So when you're 57, you'll have a 16-year-old.
Exactly.
Like, how fun is that?
Yeah, they keep me young.
Yeah, they do keep you young. They really do.
From my perspective as a dude, I would say like your relationship with your kids changes and it grows and matures with time. And so I'm not like the dad where like my son is my friend. Like that's not the case. But there's also an element of that there, right? Like Peter loves baseball just as I do. And so it's fun. Like I think about taking him to his first baseball game when he was little, and we go to baseball games now. And I imagine there'll be a day where I'm like 75 and he's like 50, whatever. And we're sitting in the stands talking about like, well, this guy, he's got potential, that sort of thing. And actually talking about bettering ourselves. You guys know that just a few years ago, I was fat. And I started thinking like,
You weren't fat. You lost 50. You were like, I lost 50 pounds. I'm like, you had that to lose?
and some of it though was like, I was thinking about things like I hit it well, I guess. I lost 60 pounds. And I was just thinking about things like my daughter, like at the time my daughter was like 6, like someday she's going to get married. Like, I don't want to be the guy who like has the freak heart attack or whatever, because he didn't take care of himself. So
I knew it was going to be worst case scenario. You were always killing yourself off in most scenarios. And I dig that about you. But yeah, it is. It's so true.
There are why.
Oh yeah.
My husband and I had the same situation where we're, on this journey of losing weight and trying to be healthy. But our coach, our dietitian or whatever, they're like, what's your why?
Yeah.
And then they talk about your kids and your future with, you want to be here for your
it
grandkids.
is.
And my husband and I are like, yeah, we need to get it
We
together.
we do the
need to get
same.
it together.
With all that said, we're about to eat some Mexican food for lunch after we record this, but we won't talk about that. So
No one needs to know those
that's
details.
just an occasional treat,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
But it's so true. It's definitely your why. And I think also I try to act like an adult. And there's just like the get it together factor. And that's why I've told some of my friends, I'm like, and relatives, I'm like, I know I have the 8 kids and so the stereotypes are there, but like, you need to have a kid. Like it just gives so much clarity, so much focus. It's so odd how underrated this is in our culture. And we are unique in that. Mm-hmm. We are very sick when it comes to that. Mm-hmm. And this is where you just couldn't explain to Thomas Jefferson, that Dad's going to go down to the clinic and get his wiener cut so he doesn't have any more children. I knew that there you go. I got
did not see that coming.
Yeah. Well, it was coming.
Fertility is something that should be celebrated for sure.
Yes. And humans, there are certain medical reasons for sure, right, for women. There's a lot of women that have to get hysterectomies and all of that. But it's unnatural to neuter yourself.
Mm-hmm. But this is one of those things where we need a 40 Days for Life podcast hall of fame of obvious statements that we didn't think anybody would ever need to say. Fertility is good. A few weeks ago on the podcast, you said 150,000 babies that were born and are alive today because of Texas's Heartbeat Act. It's a good thing those 150,000 babies are around. And one time we said the devil's the bad guy, and never really thought any of these
You
would be.
said that, and actually I cracked up because the accent came through. You're like, we used to live in a culture where the devil was the bad guy.
The bad guy.
The bad guy.
Hey there, guy.
Yeah. And
Don't you know?
Don't you know? So no, that always cracked me up. And I'll just put that it's unnatural for a guy to go down the street and get his wiener cut. So I think that's a normal or snipped, whatever you want to say. We won't be selling those T-shirts in the 40 Days for Life store. But there's just these basic things where you're like, yeah, we neuter ourselves. And that's an odd thing. And that's what's great to me, whether listeners agree with it or disagree with it. But that is the countercultural movement of you just look around and we can evaluate the state of our culture objectively and be like, who did this before us? Mm-hmm. And that's why anything in the past is evil and we're progressive and smarter. We're smarter than everybody. Everybody's evil. They're all slave owners or whatever. And you go back 500 years, that was the dark ages, It's like, but they never questioned their own gender. That they wouldn't even understand questioning it at all. Like, why are we even talking about this? And so, I think to give us a big check mark of we're doing great and not reevaluate certain things that are just basic human nature, it's just weird to criticize a woman for having children. Mm-hmm. That is an odd thing, and it happens all over the place every day.
There was a fascinating article in the New York Times about the grandparents who are not grandparents because their own kids just decided not to have kids or delayed it, or by the time they get around to it, the grandparents will be too old to enjoy having grandchildren. And I saw this one lady commenting on it, and she said, I'm in that boat. And she said, I've been really into genealogy and like tracing back my ancestry. And I realized, what's the point? One generation's just ending it all in my family. Mm-hmm. Pretty heavy stuff.
That is heavy.
Yeah.
And it's true. Like that's it.
Yeah. But that's very, very sad. And I look at, do you have grandparents still alive?
Just one, my grandma.
Me too. And my grandma, and they had 11 kids. My dad's the oldest of 11 kids. I don't know where I am. I'm like the 5th oldest cousin out of 30. There's a lot. And they all have red hair and everything. It's like typical, just massive Irish family. But like my kids get a card from my grandma. So it's their, great grandmother. She's 93 in perfect health. It's amazing. And she's my only grandparent alive. But like she'll send my kids birthday cards, like enthusiastically. She sends me a birthday card. But it's just, that's not a sign of being miserable for having a bunch of kids, right? And it's just one of those things where we have stereotyped so much that this is an awful thing, and we don't talk to old people. Go talk to old people and say, should you have had more kids? Do you regret the kids you have? Are you glad you didn't have any? Are you mad that you had 8? Are you mad that you had 2? Whatever it is, we should just interview them, and every single time. I can't tell you, particularly men, and frankly, a lot of times it was like 40 Days for Life donors who were older. And I was young, in my 20s, and we had like 3 kids or 4. And I had so many older gentlemen tell me, have a lot of kids. It is my biggest regret in life. And a lot of them were very, financially successful, and even ones that weren't, because you can say, well, they can afford it. But it's like, that was always their message. My biggest regret in life is I worked too much and I didn't have more children. And it's an actual regret. I mean, some of them have just like teared up and said, good for you. You're young. Have a bunch of kids. And obviously all that's easier said than done, but that's a powerful statement.
My wife likes to make the point too that if you're open to life and welcome children, that you never really have to worry about like, what's the right number? When's the right time? You just entrust it to God, and it takes a source of stress and decision-making out of your life.
It's also so much easier to budget because you're never going to have enough money. So, it's easier. Like, if I was just like, oh, we have to go pick out a lake house. Like, that would be like stress. And it's like, well, that's not happening. So it just kind of gives focus to your money, I think, also.
I have a more morbid thought about the fact that I have more children.
Okay.
It's like, well, when I'm on my deathbed.
Oh, yeah. No, that's a beautiful thought.
I know, but I'm saying, thinking about, I have kids and all these kids because they're going to be surrounding me on
You're
my
not going to be
deathbed.
alone.
I'm not going to be alone.
I don't think that's morbid at all. We talk about that a lot. And I think one of the challenges or difficulties we see as, we're now like the first generations that had like contraception widely available are now elderly for the first time. And it allows you to, contraception, I suppose, or abortion.
Boy, you're picking on the baby boomers today, baby.
I'll leave it at that. But
you didn't have enough kids, and now you're going to get euthanized. You deserve it.
There is a truth of the matter. Like, I suppose contraception and abortion when you're young allow you to live as you want. But as you get older, they increasingly prevent you from living as you might want, which is with your loved ones in your presence.
In my experience has been that they thought that they wanted that and they don't. Mm-hmm. And that, that's the thing. And I think that the deathbed thing is beautiful. Just getting older, my father-in-law, is a retired, essentially, OBGYN, but he goes around to nursing homes and helps elderly people now, a different form of medicine. And it's 90% of it, he's talking to them because nobody visits. It's sad. Nursing homes are sad.
Very sad. And then there's also the women who are only having one kid. and they're doing it for themselves, right? But they don't think about the kid who's growing up as an only child, and usually
Not even cousins.
No,
then.
no, and not only that, but then you also have when something happens to mom and dad, or mom or dad, and that child is going through that alone. They don't have a sibling to go through that with.
We know, I have friends too that are only children, and they're a miracle. It's not that their parents just didn't, but they're like, yeah, this is good.
Yeah, I'm referring more to those who choose it because they're like, I'm not having any more. I'm just having one, and that's it.
My experience has been with friends that are only children, or just when I meet somebody who's an only child. More often than not, they marry into a large family.
Yes, that was me. Well, I'm not an only child, but I'm only one of 2.
Okay.
And so my husband's one of 6.
You didn't see it as like chaos going to his house.
I loved it.
You loved it. It's
I loved
great.
it.
There's culture to it. You notice it particularly around the holidays. Like you want a full house at Thanksgiving and at Christmas and things like that. My brother married into a family with 11 kids. And for a variety of reasons, I'm semi-occasionally at my brother's in-law's house. And like on Sunday there, it's just, they built a playground on their property because you're talking dozens of kids there at a time. Like people just come in, they're going, there's no schedule, but there's life and abundance there.
You can easily like have wiffle ball and football. There's just so many people.
Basketball, all of it. Yeah, I think my mother-in-law has like 26 grandkids or something like that. And I don't even know if she's 65 yet. She's somewhere around that. She's like 26 grandkids and a few handful of great grandkids already. It's amazing.
That's my in-laws.
Yeah, I don't have that.
They have 26 grandchildren, and they are 69 years old. So, and they're in perfect health, and it's a total blast, right? It's just, this is like the glory days, and it's totally fun. But yeah, but they only had 4 kids, so they're just like, well, that son-in-law is fertile. But yeah, and so it's just one of those where it's like, everybody had a bunch of kids, but they look very young, and they go somewhere and they meet their, fellow boomers, and it's great because they're just like, yeah, do y'all have great kids? Yeah, we have 26. Like hitting them with a truck. What? So
some of this is like a little bit of a departure from like, are we expecting too much or asking too much of women? Can they do it all? But I think like the reason for that is because maybe we're just not promising them enough. We're not sharing the joys of motherhood or parenthood enough.
I agree.
I think it goes hand in hand.
I agree.
Let's end with Hollywood, the epitome of the culture of life. Although on this issue, it's kind of encouraging. So, plenty of women have put their careers on hold. Eva Mendes, her best movie is Hitch.
I love that movie.
I love Hitch with Will Smith and our Catholic pro-life guy, Kevin James.
Yes.
That is a funny movie, and she's really funny in that.
I like when she gets kicked in the head and falls into the
So she's in
off the jet ski.
She's in the other guys too. Okay. I know Steve has seen that.
In my first office pop.
That's right. Yeah. So she said, "I'm just so obsessed with my kids that I don't want to leave them." She told that to E. They're just still so little. So she's married to Ryan Gosling. So she took a career break to stay home with her children. A lot of people don't realize what happened to Cameron Diaz because you look up and you're like, how is she in every movie from like 1995 to 2005 and she disappears? She had kids. She said, I just feel so blessed that I get to be here now with my child and, get to be a mother, get to be the mother that I get to be. It's such a blessing. It's completely privileged, and I'm just really, really grateful. If you want to dive in, she's done a lot as far as like having a lot of regret of the movies, some of the movies that she's made. Yeah, Cameron Diaz, she's made a lot of public statements and basically like having children. Molly Ringwald was the same, the 80s actress, where she's like, I think John Hughes was a pervert. Breakfast Club. But it was really that she's said a lot about that. I don't know who Candace is.
Full House.
Oh,
Kirk Cameron's sister.
Oh, I didn't know that he was related to a Full House girl.
Candace Cameron. Burr.
You're educating me.
Sean, I'm surprised.
What am I going to do when you get deported?
I know.
I won't have all this knowledge.
What are you going to do? Seriously. What are you going to do without me?
So she said she is one of the – do we know which Full House?
The oldest daughter.
Oh, which the oldest daughter.
It's
I can't remember. It's been a long
DJ.
time. DJ.
Is it
DJ.
DJ?
Okay, DJ. I'll restrain from Full House jokes. Great show. Couldn't make it now. Because they're gay, for sure. Now.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Especially in San Francisco.
Well, they did the Fuller House. Like there was the newer version.
Are the dads attracted to women?
I don't think the dads are in it. Every now and then, I think the dad, they may make an appearance. I only watched a few episodes.
I'm not saying they're not, but I'm not saying that
I'm
either.
not saying that. Not that there's anything wrong with it. Okay, so in 2021, she said, Bure, is that right?
Bure, hockey player.
It's not. Oh,
Pavel
okay.
Bure.
Is that word? Okay.
Bure. Is that French? I think so.
Something Canadian, maybe.
I thought she pronounced it Burr, but okay.
I'm asking our Native American here, Steve. Okay. I wanted to keep working when I was just coming off of Full House, and I wanted to have a family as well. And I realized very quickly that I could not do both with the excellence that I wanted to do both of them with. So one of them had to be put on pause, and that was an easy choice. Yeah, it's just uplifting to hear some of this stuff, you know. It's like, oh, Hollywood's evil. It's like, we got to take some of the good. So any closing thoughts? Motherhood is good.
Motherhood is good, and we need to stop putting so much pressure on ourselves to compete with other women. I don't. I try not to. It's very tempting to do that, but I just try to stay focused on what's in front of me and not worry about what everyone else is doing.
And for the listener, for us, congratulations. You're doing it. Congratulations. You're doing it. Parenting is great. Let's compliment people. Let's be nice and support our moms. So please rate, review, and share this podcast, and we will see you next time.